Hello everybody, welcome to the Man Alone Solo Role-Playing YouTube channel. Today we are going to be taking a look at Agrella, City of Eternal Euphoria, the newest in the Symbaroum lineup from Free League Publishing. And I want to thank Free League for offering a review copy of this game. And I also want to just, from the top, make sure that if you've never heard of Symbaroum before, that you should know that it's one of the most awesome sort of settings, lore-wise, the art, it's all incredible, and that you also should know that there are two lines of it, okay? There's Symbaroum, the core game, as it was originally conceived, and then there's also something called Ruins of Symbaroum that has a lot of the same supplements, and that's why you have to be careful, because Ruins of Symbaroum is a 5e adaptation of Symbaroum. It's really just like the setting and everything with 5e rules stapled on top of that. And so just make sure that you check if it does say Ruins of Symbaroum. Maybe you want that, but if it does say that, just make sure you know that it's a separate. It's going to be an unfamiliar rule set if you have the core game. And I do have the core game, the Game Master's Guide, the Advanced Player's Guide. I have these cards, which were nigh impossible to get. However, I do not. There is actually dice that are issued with Symbaroum, and I do have the starter set, but I got it used. And it was available because it did not have the dice. The dice are called the Bright Devakar dice. Devakar is the sort of forest in the game that is a lot of the setting and history of the game. It relates to Devakar, and you know, if I do decide to do the ultimate of indulgent purchase and repurchase the starter kit so that I can get those dice. Obviously, there's only one place that I'm going to trust to do that, and that is the sponsor of today's video, Noble Knight Games. This video is brought to you by Noble Knight Games. Go ahead and take the Noble Knight Challenge. All you do is you roll dice, and whatever comes up here, we got S, we got W, we have L, E, and then you just go over to the Noble Knight website. I mean, I wish I could say that I was surprised, but yeah, I mean, you could really type in anything. I heard of a guy typed in just a bunch of symbols, ampersand, went home with he still plays the game to this day. And it's no surprise because since 1997, Noble Knight Games has been serving the needs of gamers just like you and me. And they specialize in out-of-print, rare RPGs, board games, collectibles, war games, miniatures, and RPGs. All things game-related. And you know, actually, interestingly enough, we're talking about Agrella from Symbaroum today. Yeah, it's like on sale. Okay, it's on sale, so pick it up at Noble Knight Games, and while you're there, go ahead and fill up your cart. With $149 orders or over, you get free shipping on domestic orders. They do worldwide shipment, fast, friendly customer service. You could sell your games there too. Thank you for sponsoring the channel, Noble Knight Games, and thank you for carrying Swole Bird. Noble Knight, where the out of print is available again, and if you click the link in the description below, you're not only going to get all of the amazing treats that I just mentioned in that ad, you're also going to be supporting the Man Alone channel. So thank you again, Noble Knight. Boy, what an ad! I had a rare experience in my life in which I wanted to slap myself in the face, but I think I got everything important in that ad, and their brick and mortar store, if you live anywhere near Wisconsin, you should take like a pilgrimage to it at some time. It's incredible. So Symbaroum, City of Eternal Euphoria, I'm very glad that I'm able to do this review, which forced me to give a comprehensive inspection of this, because when I started looking through it, I was like, oh no, no, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing, Free League, with this setting? And then as I read through all of it, I was like, I see what you're doing. I got you now. Um, and I must say that if you come into this having an idea of Symbaroum, maybe from one of my videos, maybe from just having played it or whatever, uh, you might be, it could be very jarring because there is an in-game mechanic, I guess is the word. Well, it's a law. Basically, you're in this city, okay? It takes place in Agrella, and Agrella is in a part of the map that was not. Let me get this out. You're in a part of the map that was not very explored. So I mentioned Davokar. Davokar is this big forest, and under it is the humans' kingdom of Ambria. Okay, and so there's bright Davokar, and then there's dark Davokar, and inside here is like where the elves are, and the elves in this game are like sort of eco-terrorists. They also say that there's an iron pact that they have that basically says that 1,000 years ago they made a deal with the human kingdom that if any humans come in here, they can kill them on site with no repercussion. But some people are like, is that real? Um, and so this is going to, a lot of it takes place like on this front. The previous, I think, 6-part adventure was in Thistlehold right here. This is actually going to, Agrella is down here near Lake Abel. And like the lake that was mostly in the last one was Volgoma. And so the thing about Agrella, like I said, that's very jarring, is that there is a joy mandate there. Okay. And when I first heard this, I was like, what? Like, this is not a very. I'm like, are you serious? And basically, I'll just read this box. The joy mandate stipulates that anyone who publicly displays sadness, anger, hatred, or other negative emotion shall be fined a minimum of 3 ortegs for minor offenses and up to 1 thaler for more serious ones. In the event of repeated serious violations, this is my favorite part, the grump or gloomster is sentenced to banishment and must leave Agrella within a week. All their property is confiscated and any business license revoked. The organization responsible for enforcing the mandate is the Joy Guard. Okay? And so not only is this city, is there a joy mandate, there's also like festivals all year round. There's technically a festival season that starts in midsummer, but all year round, just think of like Mardi Gras. And I think it fits like New Orleans well and any other like party city, because one of the things it says, have you ever been in New Orleans? And let me just say before this, New Orleans is one of my favorite cities. When I graduated college, I lived on a couch in New Orleans temporarily for some of like the most memorable months of my life. But this is very, very reminiscent of that, because basically it says that like everybody is joyful. They banned public displays of grief, but that like something is wrong. Like underneath that joyful exterior, something is amiss. And that is something like if you spend any amount of time I'm sure it's like the same way in Rio or any of these other places where it's just like mandatory joy all the time. And so when I first read that, I was like, this is really strange. But it does turn into, especially with some of the stuff that I'm not going to talk about in this video, which is in the GM section, it does turn into a very clever thing, because there is basically a massive repression going on, a massive repression of human emotion. And so what it does is it creates almost this like powder keg where, because people have to have these smiles plastered on their faces at all times, not just like, and it's not just at the threat of a fine is only introductory. You can be kicked out of the city for this. Because of that, there is a very, very high level of reactivity. Additionally, one of the things that I think is good is that I have found that very often when we're uncertain of something in creating as GMs, as solo players, we can default to conflict. Conflict seems like a reliable thing to use to drum up action, and that's usually true. I mean, that's why almost all games have a combat mechanic and not like an agreement or a nice hug mechanic. Like that's conflict is the heart of plot, right? Their plot conflict is what is usually the inciting incident in a story. However, we can lean too far into conflict, and even though this sort of tips it in the full opposite direction, I think that it's just a good practice in sort of seeing what can happen when there is the first step is a positive step, even if it's not real, even if that's not the second step, having the first step being somebody welcoming you or whatever. There's different districts here, Calvera, Cerrado, etc. And this is actually, it comes with the map. The Davokar, map that Ambria and Davokar, that's from the starter set. But this comes with the map of Agrella, right there. And this map is okay, but the ones on the back are really good. So you have one here. I won't say what this one is for, but we'll say that it's sort of something that happens later in the book. And then there's two additional maps. One of like a city neighborhood. I forgot if that's Calvera. No, probably not, because Calvera is like the downtown, I think. Yeah. And then this is inside a house that is part of the campaign, which unfolds in 3 acts. I'll give you a little bit. As I was just playing through to my head, I'm very, very hungry to use this map I bought from Drive-Thru RPG like a year ago. And all of a sudden I was like, I think it's this massive city map that actually is 4 sheets worth. Like if you lined it up from top to bottom, I think it would be like 4 feet by 2.5 feet. And I was thinking to myself, that this would be kind of a cool map to use for this city. It's a little bit like, I am probably going to use this. Well, no, actually, I was about to say I was going to use it in Fallen, which does take place in 17th and 18th century Baroque, but actually the city map for Hillgrab in that game is unbelievable. But I just want to say that I've not used maps, like outside maps, for solo play enough, and I want to start doing that. Like, yes, this one comes with a map, a lot of games do, but I think changing a map could probably have a lot of effect on the entirety of the game as a whole. Now, this is where I will say something that is a little bit worrisome to me from just not a solo play perspective, perhaps. In fact, from a solo play perspective, this might be better, but this game, I think it's like the first 37 pages is background. And then there's a GM section in section 3, or section 2. And then in section 3, it has the campaign. Oh, is this not like Symbaroum art at its absolute best? By the way, the artist for Symbaroum is usually Martin Grip. Let's see, who did it this time? Illustration is Gustav Eklund. But the graphic design is Johan Noor from Merkborg. And the sort of sludge terror that is like slapped across these pages here, it really shows. Now, it is kind of text heavy, but what I wanted to say is that this is a lot of stuff, even though it's not 80. It's a lot of stuff to have up front and have the players have access to. For some of the stuff I was watching would say that it gives I forgot, was it Gaming Gang? I think he was saying, well, this is too much for the characters because if you have characters that are going to call the GM on their stuff, like if you want to change around the backstory a little bit, like the player characters have a lot of information here about Agrella. I've never played with a group like that. I've always played with groups that like getting them to read the stuff is like pulling teeth. And so from that perspective, I almost feel like it's a bit overwhelming here. and that I would rather have this as something that I unfold as the GM, but because it's out front and technically it can be read before the campaign. I mean, I could just tell them not to, right? But rules as written or adventure as written, it's just an interesting choice having this all out here up front, especially because as a player character, I'm not sure I would even want to know this stuff beforehand. Like, do I really want to know all the landmarks in town? Do I want to know all the festivals and all the reasons for the festivals? Or do I want to find that stuff out in game? And I will say that I think if I were GMing this for a group, I would lean into these, which is there's a good package of communications that you will hand to the players in game or have them read and stuff like that. And I think that I might tell them, hey, you know what? Why don't you go ahead and read like maybe even, I don't know, like the first 10 pages or something like that. And then don't worry about it beyond that. Because I guess the bigger thing is I don't know how it's going to help them that much other than knowing about Agrella, where it fits in the larger setting, and maybe looking at these memorable events, how it's split up. I know that as a player, I'm not super motivated to be like, oh, by day one, I've got to know all the districts of the city. Like, I'm not sure. That's kind of like multiplication tables in a world with a calculator, right? And so, um, I don't know. I'll have to see. Now, we'll talk about what that means for the solo player a little bit. But basically, the story here. Zoom in just a bit. All right. So, first of all, it's 176 pages, and like you saw, you can get it right now on Noble Knight for around 35. The city itself, Agrella, is the city of eternal euphoria because of these festivals, because of this joy mandate, and it's very lavish too. All right, and I guess it's in the the way that Amber is divided up. I think is duchies. Is that how you say it? And it's in Cassandrian, so it's on the northeast shores of Lake Ebble, and the duchy is dutched by the Archduchess Esmeralda, and she's actually the queen's half sister. So that does play into it. And it has several festivals, several holidays, and it also, and they play into this, as you can see on the front, it is the home of the Ordo Magica. And the Ordo Magica is the they are like the sanctioned magic faction in Symbaroum. So anybody who is outside of that, there's like some other schools of magic, but they are considered, let's say, with contempt by the Ordo Magica because they are very ripe for corruption. People who use that can be easily corrupted. Okay. Now, there's definitely it's very interesting. There's definitely going to be, in the midst of this party, this atmosphere, which is going to be an unusual environment for a Symbaroum campaign. However, I think this was for me, for whatever reason, this was like something that got me very interested. Was that, let me find it. Hold on 1 second. Okay, so they make a sort of big deal out of early that the player characters need to be invested in this city, and I do think that's important. It's not as important in other adventures, but they cannot be, or it would be very hard if they're just like there for the party, because if they are, then when like stuff goes down, it seems unrealistic given the setting of Symbaroum for them to be like, something is afoot. I think that us heroes should solve it. Like, that's just not how things go in the universe of Symbaroum. And so, what put me over the edge here was that they, in addition to having an investment, they recommend that your characters live in the town and that you identify their houses, and that also they own a business. And they give you examples here of, now you could be sellswords, but you could be hunters, tradespeople, artists, and that if you really want to bring your player character in from another campaign, you can do that, and they can sort of be peripheral, but it has to be something that makes what happens in Agrella have stakes. And the reason for that is, and this is another way that this is a very unique adventure. What this really comes down to in this game you're doing like an investigation. You have to investigate what is going on. And again, not that I don't want to spoil anything, but basically these first 36 pages, which I once thought were 80, maybe it's because 3 and 8, like 3 is the incomplete 8. Anyways, these first 36 pages give you this overview of Agrella, what's going on there. It gives you all the different establishments. And one of the first scenes where if you're playing with a GM, you'd have the group go to a theater to see a performance, and something happens in that performance that sets things off. But it's going through it, and I'm like, yeah, okay. So I have a brewery. There's a sugar beet. It's like a pastry shop and all this stuff. And I'm going, yeah, this does seem like something's going down. Maybe not everything is like they say it is. Maybe. And then you start with the very first page of the GM section, and you're like, okay, yeah, this is like now it's not, there might be something going wrong here. This is all wrong. And once you get a handle on like what actually is going on, not only now, but historically, what the backstory of Agrella is, that's what made me feel like, yes, now I'm back to Symbaroum. Like now this is what's here. But at the same time, it is different enough such that if you're very used to like how the adventures went in the first game, it's going to be a bit of a change here. It's going to be a bit of a switch. It's going to have a different feel to it because you can go out of the city, and towards the end of the adventure, it probably will lead you out of the city. But for the most part, you're going to be going around this city. You're going to be talking to people. You're going to be having to determine who's telling the truth. You're going to have to determine where the sources of power are and who might be saying things just because they are paid off or they're threatened or they're afraid. And it has a rich history to it, which in solo play, I think is a very helpful thing in one way. But we talked about before how rich history can be helpful or it can be hindering, right? Because sometimes for myself, I know other people's mileage may vary. Sometimes I could feel weighed down by the history of a game because I am constantly having to reconcile the history with whatever is happening right now. I don't think that will be too much of a problem in this game. And in fact, some of the historical things are really, really fun. They have, for instance, this, let me see, it was called, there was a historical moment where they started cutting down trees, and then all the people started, like, they didn't want people to cut down these trees, so they started going there and like getting in fights with the people cutting them down, and that didn't work. They all got fines and stuff for violating the joy mandate. And then they just started going up into the trees, and in fact, even the people from the goblins from the forest started coming up and climbing in these trees as well. And there's also an interesting relationship between the goblins and the humans in this that is complex at the outset, and then again when you get to the GM section and you see what's going down there, it's even more complex. Okay, so I will say, I'm trying to think if I have anything else before I move on to the solo section, because when I talk about the solo, I'm going to bring up some stuff from the GM section, and so that will be kind of like the spoiler cutoff. If you're not interested in learning anything else, we can probably shake hands and go our separate ways. So I'm just going to make sure that I've hit everything I want to hit. Okay, so the last thing I want to say before I get into the solo perspective of it is that you'll see very often in reviews of Symbaroum, and particularly of this adventure, that they feel a bit railroady. And I think that this is a misunderstanding of how adventures are supposed to unfold. In this game, I think it depicts it quite well in that this is the kind of thing that makes people go, okay, yeah, that's a complex flowchart of what happens in the campaign, but ultimately, this is not that many options, right? You're either going this way or this way, and I want there to be unlimited possibility. And then there's some things where you go around and loop around again and go to the other place. And okay, this adventure I think is a great example of what I consider to be, and the circumstances of this adventure are perfect for this. I think ideally, and this is just from having played, I've never GM'd Symbaroum. I've played in a campaign of it a long time ago, but having tinkered with the solo mechanic of it as well, I remembered this again. This is this is supposed to be divided, like the acts of this supplement are divided along with the festivals. And these festivals occur intermittently throughout months. And so, really, you should be starting on the night of a festival right here and moving through this. And then you're not supposed to ram through all of this stuff. Go and exist in the city. And especially if you have a business and you're there with multiple different people, I think this is an opportunity to really, really develop an affinity, a habitus there in this place, so that not only does the city matter to your player characters, but it matters to you. That's the way to play this, and that's what's going to give it variety. And so it would be, you know, I understand the response to that as well. Okay, so I just have to like make up my own campaign out of it. No, that's actually where this shines, because in the GM section here, there is all of these events in this section here that you could literally roll up any of them. They're on all the different locations. There's 4 of them in all the different locations, and they're significant. Like they're well developed events that you can go through, and each of those, I think you can pursue an entire game session based on that hook. Okay, and so this is leading up to something, because when I talk about in the next section, like what we see, what is actually going on here, this is only the start of it, which is actually really surprising and really, really encouraging. Because I have to be honest, after the last Symbaroum adventure closed, I thought that was it. Like I didn't think we were gonna see more Symbaroum, and that's a shame, because here's a little bold assertion here. Uh, Out of all the tabletop games that I want to see made into other forms of media, I actually think Symbaroum would be one, like the most compelling television series. It is not one that people will think they want, but it is, once you like enter this world and you see all the different stakeholders and you start seeing all these characters, like it is just so much more mature and well developed and spiritually grounded and symbolically grounded. To give an idea of how like the symbolic of it, I think I will show this. It's a little bit embarrassing, I think, but I think it's good. So when I have been solo playing this, I've actually been using this, which is just a design that I made, and it represents the 3 different forces at play in Symbaroum. Okay, and those 3 forces are, to understand those, I did a really short video a long time ago. It's like 2 minutes long. I'm actually going to play that as I bridge over to the next section. But in, I think it's the GM book. Let me see here. It is in the GM book, and it talks about the underpinning forces in the mythos of this world are Virta, Vilda, and Ratha. And Virta is like creative power, Vilda is civilizational ordering power, and Ratha is the destructive power. And when you understand these as sort of the meta theme of this whole thing, it guides a lot of the play. Ooh, sorry. So that I was like, do I want this next thing to move towards Vilda, towards or Virtha, Vilda, or Ratha? And they all sort of like blend into each other as well. I know it's sort of literally a chaotic drawing, but yeah, I would just like, I would even just, you could drop anything. A ring would work well. Well, I would put it inside the top cover of the star set here, and kind of see like the intersection points, the tension points, and everything like that. And so I'm gonna play that video. I always like that video. I don't know if many people saw it, but I do. I read that poem, and I think this tells you the entire story of Symbaroum. Let's check it out. All right, here we go.
And at the dawn of days was Vieta, the power that creates. Where nothing had reigned supreme, Vieta gave life to all. Shaped here and there, spawned now and then, formed the one and in chorus the other. And where attraction arose, the wild thrived and multiplied. But out of the untamed Vilda appeared the power that rules, the power of willful violence that burns here and there, that curves now and then according to ideals and cravings, that harvests the one and rejects the other. With time, Vilda's appetite grew, and the birth was inevitable. Because violence begets hate, begets Ratha, the power that reacts. Born of Vilda's hunger for Vieta's design, Ratha is everywhere and nowhere, always close where mother meets mother, always mounting in strength with the force of the violence. The arrival of the black fruit is fated as inescapable, as terrible. And it happens, has happened, will happen again, that Ratha grows boundless, furious, blind in her hunger. It happens that the blackness grows flesh and spirit and the sharpest of claws, that the fruit sheds seeds that poison the first in the aim to suppress the second. Then dies all.
All right, so I definitely don't want to make this into like a how-to on Symbaroum because I am not the resource. I'm not the person to be doing that. But I would be remiss not to at least describe how skill checks work or attribute tests in this game, just so that you understand that core piece of things, because I think it will help you to imagine how different procedures might go should you solo play or play in a group. All right. So it's a non-traditional system, but it's elegant. All right. And I think it does have some maybe leveling issues at higher levels because the stats or attributes are always going to be 5 to 15, except for certain circumstances. And really, the way that you build your characters, you're going to be adding different traits and powers and stuff, which actually feels like you can't get a really strong character, but actually if you add lots and lots of powers, because you can go outside even of your archetype, your character can kind of be the opposite issue where your character can become unstoppable. But there are lots of things out there to talk about how to balance that and pace that and stuff like that, and it all depends on what kind of game you want to play. So anyways, this is a pre-made character sheet for Flato, a mystical being and bodyguard. I'm sure that many of you out there have that same resume. And a couple of things that you have to remember in Symbaroum is that, number one, everything is based off 10. So whenever you see like a +3 or a -2, +3 is 13, -2 is 8. So it's all based off 10 as the starting point. It's all player-facing roles, all right? And this not only means that the GM never rolls, it also means that it's the player, not the NPC, that is testing their attribute, or at least the attribute test is based ultimately on the player. All right. Attribute tests are one attribute versus another. Everything can be metabolized this way. Like if you are trying to be sneaky, you would measure just your discreet versus somebody else's. Maybe actually, probably if you're sneaking, cunning versus vigilant, right? Discreet would be more like secretive, right? So if you are trying to convince somebody to, like, move away from their guard post for a little while so you could talk to the prisoner, that would be your persuasive versus their resolute. And in combat, it goes this way too, right? It's going to be your accurate against their defense. All right. NPCs and player characters do attack and defense a little bit differently. And it takes a little bit of patience to understand this. And it takes a little bit of recalibration every now and again. But it's always for you, it's always going to be your accurate is going to be for melee and range. The only difference is that for range, there's more like environmental modifiers that can apply, like cover and line of sight, stuff like that. And then you're going to use resolute for any like incantations. Okay. If an enemy is attacking you, usually it's going to be their accurate versus your quick. All right. And quick is your ability to dodge, to jump out of the way, to do a two-step juke and roll around them. But for the enemy, it will be accuracy versus their defense. And the reason for this is because this defense number is sort of a derived. It includes like all their stuff, their quickness, their gear modifiers and everything. So it like does some work for you. For instance, in the monsters and traits deck, one of the reasons I like this is because it just shows the modifiers on these. It doesn't show the base numbers, which for me is really good because it's not distracting. And the defense here is +1 and then an armor of 4. All right. And so I'm going to just do like a basic run through of what this might look like. So we have an accurate of 13. And we have an armor protection of, let's see, is there an armor protection listed on here? That defense a little bit high. I'll make this. I'll just make it up. It'll be easier that way. Okay. So we have an accurate of 13, and let's say that we have an armor protection of 1. Okay, because we're just starting out. And then we have a sword that does 1d8 damage. And we have a toughness of 10 and a pain threshold of 3. And I'll explain what those mean. And we have a resolute of 10. All right. And then we have the plunderer. And the plunderer has a defense of +1, armor of 4, accurate +5. Weapon is a club, 1d10. Quickness is -3. And we'll do a pain threshold of 8. All right. So in round 1, you are going to roll your accurate modified by the plunderer's defense. Okay. And so my accurate is 13. The plunderer's defense is +1. This means that my target number is 13 minus +1 is 12. So my target number here is 12. I have to roll equal to or less than 12 to successfully hit. If I do, I roll a 1d8 for my sword. Let's say it hits for 5. They have an armor of 4, and that means I hit them for 1. Okay. And this is we would reduce the toughness by 1. All right. And then you would check the amount of damage you did to the pain threshold. And if the amount of damage is equal to that pain threshold, then there has to be a check, and it can do stagger or like stun damage to them, because it's just like that's how big of a hit they can stand before they're knocked back on your feet. All right, so now they are going to attack. And by the way, we use quick to come up with the initiative, but I'm not going to go through that right now. There is, by the way, in the GM book and also online, you can get like a nice GM sheet that lists all of this out. There is a GM screen out there, but it's rare, just like these cards, just like the dice. All right. So you don't roll against the enemy's stats. You roll your defense. All right. And so the defense that we have here, did I flip everything around? Did I not list this? Okay. Well, that's fine. Is 12. And this is modified by the plunderer's accurate. Okay. And so the target number then, the accurate is +5. All right. So I'm going to do 12 minus 5 equals 7. All right. And this is now if you think about this here, you'd be like, oh no, this seems like way too low for me. I'm not going to be able to roll under it. Correct, because their accuracy is +5, right? And so given that they have such a good accuracy, they are going to have a high likelihood of nabbing you, right? Because this is and by the way, I confused myself here, but remember that the defense that I'm talking about for your player character is quickness, so it should have been 13, but it's the same difference. So saying that the quick is 12 minus 5 equals 7. I roll. Let's say I roll a 9. 9 is greater than 7. Okay, so that means I am hit. If I would have rolled equal to or under 7, my defense or my quickness would have 1, because it's player facing. I'm testing my attribute. Okay, the attribute of the enemy is static. That's not in question. My attribute is the one that I am testing here, and I am found wanting. All right. Then they roll for damage, 1d10, and they roll a 6. Now we get to apply our armor, which is -1. That means they hit me for 5 damage. All right. And I had 10. 10 minus 5, I'm at 5 toughness. And my pain threshold is 3. So this is over pain threshold. And so now I have to roll. This is like a reaction roll. Sometimes you roll your stats to like be to do something against somebody, and that's when you test 1 versus 1. But for this, I'm just testing my own resolute, so that base number is 10. And I have resolute. I roll that, and I roll my target number is 10. I got to get equal to or less than 10. I roll a 7. I'm good. I take the damage, but I stay on my feet. If I had rolled under that, I would have missed the next round or whatever, right? So what do? I attacked. I hit the plunderer for 3. They're down to 12 out of 15. Well, not really, because of their bodacious armor. But then the plunderer attacks. I take 5 damage, and then I had to do the pain threshold check. Success. I am not staggered. All right, so like I said, not the best source on that, and you can see sometimes when I'm explaining things, I get myself a little. I was best at geometry, folks, but that should give you a basic idea of how that works. And you see here, you put all your abilities and powers. You could put your weapons and armor here. On the back, this is bio, friends and companions, artifacts. This is the big like treasure seeking thing, equipment here. And yeah, so let me clear this for a second here. Oh, and I just want to say, like, the resolute, the check of the 10, technically, even though it kind of violates the system I was setting up, that would be an example where you test resolute versus resolute because it only involves you, right? And so you're testing whenever there's something that involves two things that have attributes, there's going to be one of their attributes on both ends. That could even be something that has an attribute that's like non-biological, but for yourself, it's going to be your resolute versus your resolute to see if you stagger. And then pain threshold, the attacker determines whether the effect, if the actual damage is equal to or higher than the target's pain threshold. If so, the attacker is either knocked to the ground or the attacker is allowed to perform a free attack. And then should the actual damage suffered be greater than the character's remaining toughness, the character is either incapacitated or dying. The player must make a death test turn to see if the character survives death or not. Okay. And the death test is a 1d20 right here. In terms of Agrella, some write-ups of it said a couple of things. Besides the things I covered, like with the setting being a little different, being a little bit more on the investigation side, that's true. One thing I don't think is true, and nobody had like the reviews for this were quite positive, but one thing people were saying was it's a little bit like railroady. And I don't agree to that. For every part of this act, there's going to be this flow sheet here of the different steps that you run your characters through. And I agree, if you run your character from prologue to act 3, it'd be hard for me to make a case that's saying, okay, because there's like 3 points that have branching pathways, it's not railroady. But this is not the correct way to play Symbaroum. Symbaroum, even in this book alone, has tons and tons of events that happen, and the GM's guide has other ones that are usable in any mission, in any adventure, etc. And if you look at these, any of these events, this is during a festival. This is during the Festival of Unsung Heroes, during the Night Slaughter, which is the opening night. Any of these like tables, the events, there are 4 events per table. The events in each of these tables, if you go through 4 of them, or honestly, for some of them, if you just go through one of them, it's enough for a whole session. Like some of them are quite, I don't know if like this one says a young girl in exquisite clothes comes crying to the player characters. Her cat Waffles has run away and the characters seem nice. Can they help her find it? So that's something that maybe wouldn't take up a whole session. But then again, why is she in exquisite clothes, right? Like, does that lead to something else? And certainly, if it's not one event, an entirety of the events that happen in Knight's Isle or on Pine Isle or in Mariner's Court, any of these can take up a whole session. And the amount of NPCs and intrigue that's happening here and the different contacts that you have, all of this, these are all the contacts in Agrella and all the relationships that you have. All of this is designed to explore and build up knowledge and affinity for the city. And that affinity is really important, okay? So again, the book really wants the player characters to have an investment in Agrella. There is ways to like incorporate if you have a character from another mission, but it should be that most of your characters care about this city, because Symbaroum is not the type of in-game universe where it's like coming up to you about Waffles. That is very rare, because it's very rare that in Symbaroum you're going to be like, oh, there's a citizen is in trouble. Somebody needs a hero to help. That's not usually how this game goes, right? And so this is there has to be a reason that you care about what's going on, because otherwise it's going to be like, oh, there seems to be something wrong here. All right, well, whatever, let's just keep going. And so it encouraged you to do two things, which is, this was the moment where I was like, whoa, this has some special potential for solo play. First of all, they recommend that you have a home to be the group's home. And that they could each have their own home, but it could be like an area of the city that they live and work. That's the second thing, is it gives you instructions to have a business. And this is the right way to play. And honestly, this is what informs my suggestions as far as the approach. If you were to solo play this, a couple of things you need to do. Number one, you really need to lean into this business and into the homestead, because this is going to, any time that there is something that is a stronghold or something stronghold-esque that you can grow, that you can add to, that you can increase the strength of, the output of, the usefulness of, whatever it is, those are things that are going to inform the why of your solo play, and it's going to keep you going. The second thing is that if we looked at those events, there's one here that reminds me of what I'm going to say is sort of a frame shift that has to happen, especially in any investigative solo play game, right? It says, the day after the end of the festival, there's a long line outside the Joy Guard headquarters. Through... Oh, wrong page. Please hold. Please hold. One of the guard. Yeah, here we go. One of the guards at the bridge toll house informs the characters that the toll is doubled today. Refusing to pay means that they are not allowed to pass. If they pay up, the characters can make a vigilant test to see the guards chuckle to themselves as they put half the money in their own pockets once the characters have moved on. Now, this is something that causes one to say, well, how do I do this in solo play? Obviously, I'm not going to want to give them money. I know that they're just taking half of it. I should start trouble, but it's not really fair that I have this information, because if I was playing in a group, I probably would just fork it over, right? So this is where you switch frames and don't ask yourself, what am I going to do? Say, what does the player character do? So you could do that vigilance test, or you could test anything that will be like perception, insight, anything that will determine the outcome of the situation and put it outside of your domain of control. And so instead of saying, am I going to make the right choice here? Because you sense that that's not fair, say, what is my player character going to do? Are they perceptive enough? Are they clever enough? Are they intimidating enough? Whatever it is, to not fall into this trap. And that becomes the game of that scenario. Okay. The third thing is that because you have this ongoing sequence, right? Because you have this flow chart of events, and you want to be able to work through these for each act, you really do want to make sure that you're not putting yourself in a situation where you go down a road that you can't like backtrack without doing like retconning. And I think the way to do this, especially with how everything else is setting up, is I would create a group of player characters. And you can even choose one to be like the main one. But have them sort of play through these things. And if one of them should die or get taken off track or make a choice that seems impossible to go back from, you can switch to one of the other player characters. And I think that this is easier than saying I'm going to make a team or a group of player characters and then try to manage all 5 of them at once. I don't think that for me is never easy. But if you could sort of like switch POV between them, I think that works great. in this, especially because you have this sort of home base. It doesn't make a lot of sense if you're out adventuring because you're all going to be in a group. And so either you have to do some big time abstraction to figure out how all of them are going to fare in combat and stuff like that, or you're going to have to play through all of them. And in a game with Symbaroum, there's all these traits, all these things that can modify the roles. That's going to get heavy. And anytime things are going to get heavy and you're going to be pushing through a scene like Sludge, that is going to be a big disincentive. If it's going to feel like work, you're going to have that feeling the next time you think about opening the book up to solo play. So you, in my opinion, based on how my brain works, best to keep it breezy, best to keep it so that you are only worried about advancing the plot when it feels like the right time to advance the plot. If you try to speed run these uh, events here, not only are you going to not have a very satisfying time, you're not going to feel that deepening of the investment in the city as a player character and as you as the player. But also, it doesn't really make sense because, again, the different acts in this book are divided by these major festivals that start midsummer. So you probably want to separate them by at least a few days, if not a few weeks. And during that time, you have plenty to do here, and you have plenty to do from. I mean, look at all this. You have the Ordo Magica here. This is going to have plenty of different player characters that are involved. And go ahead, look into the GM section. And like I said, this is the part that's going to kind of be spoiler. So if you're really invested right now, maybe you don't want to hear this. But the truth is, it is, as a solo player, you are going to have to be in on the surprise. Yes, you're not going to have that like thrill of discovery that you would get from playing in a group when you discover, the true history of Agrella. But you have to realize that it's a different type of play, and we're going after different moments of thrill and of joy and of delight here. All right. And so, really, if you read the true history of Agrella, you could do that at the beginning of the game. You could do that after a while. You can form your own opinion of it. You could play through a few sessions and then go to this and then read this and then say, oh my gosh, I can't believe what's going on behind the scenes here, because the truth of Agrella, spoiler alert, 3, 2, 1, is that this city is basically formed on the back of a massive slaughtering of the people who were there. All right. So essentially, it was like people that were refugees from the south were living there. Then in comes these people who worship Prios, who ascended. It was the god Sol, and then ascended to Prios, who's like the one. And there's these Alberian settlers who stayed with like the old faith, and the new settlers come from Ambria, and they're like, "Oh, hey, brother, nice to see you coming in. Enjoy yourself." And the new settlers are like, "Bro, these guys are heretics. We should probably kill them, right?" And it's like, "Yeah." And here's the thing too, is that the goblins during that time were kept as like slave labor for the Ambrians, and they were the ones that had to drag away the bodies. And they were like, well, we can't, now the goblins know this secret. So how are we going to make sure that like when new people come, they don't understand that the reason why we have this city is because we essentially genocided everyone here. And so they paid them off by giving them like lands and businesses and stuff. But goblins only live like 20 to 25 years. So a lot of the older ones are dying. And a lot of the younger humans don't know about this. And so they're starting to be like, why are these goblins here? And why are we giving them land and allowing them to own businesses? So this is increasing the level of tension here. And then something described in the first part of the book that is this very weird event that is known as the Sorrow Plague, when a group of people were together listening. I'm not sure how to say this word. I think it's theurge. the first theurge was doing a sermon on the hardships of war, and all of a sudden, two people start crying, and then four people, then eight, then there was an outbreak of just sobbing, uncontrolled sobbing, sobbing, sobbing that spread across the city. They tried to stop people. The Joy Guard was deployed. They couldn't stop it. It was on like the night, the first, what was going to be the first festival of the season, the Night Slaughter, and it's a great festival name, right? They just could not stop them. And you later, it's just like left open ended, the Sorrow Plague in the start of the book, but you learn that the reason for this was because there was a distribution of this pretty much a drug called Ophelia's Tears. And Ophelia's Tears heighten, like hyper heighten whatever emotion you're feeling. And so people there were listening, and it was just like, discussing the war is hell or whatever. And they started sobbing. They couldn't stop. And people will use this on the black market not only to heighten like their celebration and joy and lust, euphoria, everything as they're doing these festivals, but people will also use it in their own home secretly to cry because they're not allowed to be sad or even talk about that. So they'll use it to sort of expiate those feelings so that they can put this fake smile on and then go back out and, do what they need to do in Agrella. And so this underground drug trade, they're trying to crack down on it. That's another element of the story. If I were you, and you don't have to follow my suggestions, but if you wanted to solo play this, what I would do is a couple things. Number one, create a group of player characters, make them like your roster. You could switch between them or pick one main one. And switch if there's a death or anything like that, which there doesn't have to be, right? Like you just choose not to if you're solo playing. And then I would do in the first part of solo play, I would do three things. Number one, I would cultivate several contacts. All right. And there is this list of contacts that if you're playing in a group, it actually recommends that each player character takes it on themselves to establish 3 contacts in the city. I would choose a house, I would choose a business, and I would figure out what that looks like. I would then take some time to enter into the different businesses, the institutions and establishments, get to know people there, go have a meal, drink, like just inhabit that. Don't worry about I've got to go on an adventure. I've got to get money. Like, just play out these scenes. Go to the Ambria Brewery, right? See who you meet, see what happens there, and allow that to inform the progression of the larger plot, okay? And when you're ready to start something, go to the section that's called... It's called Adventure Seed. Yeah, it's called Secrets and Adventure Seeds. And choose one of these because each of these sections will give a rundown of what's going on, and then it will have a thing that says the player character's entry. And so there's like 4 or 5 of these that talk about a place that the player characters enter this story, how they interact. Follow that through. All right. And then when you get to Act 1, go ahead and take each of these on like one step at a time. All right. And then in between each of these, do other stuff. All right. Work on your business. Go to the events and roll some of these events. Go to the different locations. Meet the people in Ordo Magica. Okay, so that's one. That was a lot for one. Number 2 is, I would say that there is a plot element in Act 1 that involves backing one of 3 of the By the way, this adventure is called The Outrage of Betrayed Brethren. In the first act, there is... these are the contacts. There is a list of the 3 people that are in line for taking on this very important administrative role. I forgot what it is, but... the 3 candidates, right? Once player characters examine the box, that's a thing, they will realize that someone's plotting against these, And if you get the letters, these three candidates, choose which of the three candidates you maybe have a relationship with or who you side with. You can go and talk to each of them. Do that and decide who your like horse in the race is before you move on to Act Two. Okay. And then in terms of prepping in the beginning, I don't think you have to like read every single thing at the beginning of this book, but I do think that you should familiarize yourself with two things. Some of right, like some of the establishments are good, but you don't need to know all of these. I would say know the major events, right? Like the sorrow plague was important. Know like all of them and what happened, because I think that these memorable events right here on page 10, 11, these really, really like seed a lot of things. All right. The festivals, as long as you know the schedules for them, you can go check out what they are. But this is where it says, in the book, it says this adventure is takes over 3 months of time, and again, it's working on an actual calendar for the different festivals. So let things arise, and then move forward to the new box of like the next progression in whatever act you're in, Act One. Don't move to the next thing until you have cultivated, contacts, businesses, etc. Okay. And then I would say the last thing that you want to do on page 50 and 51, it has these lesser groups, specifically Realm of the Order Agents and the Empty Hand. There's the core Sacred of the Old Blood, Spawn of Doom as well. I would say one of these first two here, or the city government, I would say try to infiltrate one of those. I think that will best position you to have like sort of be successful. I think that is the best first move to make sure that you're in the right spot when things like pop off. Okay, because there is a very complicated web here, and it's possible to get drawn in a very far direction. And I was trying to look through this thinking, what is one thing that probably like a solo player should definitely do, or else they're going to get sidetracked a lot. And because they're in the intrigue section, there's like lots of lists of rumors that you can go on, and some of those rumors are legitimate dead ends, but it doesn't mean that they can't generate anything as far as like enjoyable gameplay. It just might like lead you astray plot wise. So infiltrate these groups, and keep in mind that there really is like a bit of 1984 stuff here, where the Joy Mandate has like this new informant system where people are like getting prizes. I don't know what's it's not like, you want a new car. They're being paid to inform on their fellow citizens, and so you definitely do not want to be completely obvious about everything that you're doing. So here's my final thoughts as far as solo play. It really depends on what type of solo player you are. In terms of how structured you like things, if you're somebody who needs the procedures of solo play to be very structured, probably not the best choice for you, unless you're trying to work that muscle to be a little bit more open with these things. But you are not going to be presented with a scenario in which it's not going to be like 2D6 Dungeon or Care Nethalis or something where there's a very obvious loop of play. You're going to have to explore it. If you're somebody that doesn't want to have to read and explore to get a handle on things, Symbaroum is probably not for you, right? Because even though this one I think has a lot of front end stuff comparatively, all Symbaroum is all about this, because it really is an amazing, amazing lore. There's some things in here that I didn't even talk about. There's this whole lost kingdom where the lake used to be bigger, and I won't even say more about that, but it's definitely the situation that they're setting up something here. And I'm really, really happy about that, because even as you are sort of seeing how things conclude, it's very clear that like something's cooking. And if you want an example of the pacing of it, I think it's in Act 2. Let me just check right here. Act 3, actually. You can see this is a timeline of the actions in Act 3, and it goes from the month Andonia 23rd to Andonia 29th. So it's pretty much a week, and you can kind of see how many events happen within that week. And that will give you a good idea of how things move along. You can read this sort of, if you were to like read it right now without having read anything before it, you wouldn't have to worry about too much of a spoiler, because you're not going to know who they're talking about. You know, Gerardo persuades Urbina, like you don't know what that is yet. Don't worry about, seeing things prematurely, etc., because it's going to be a different type of enjoyment. So if you're somebody that is okay with ambiguity, if you are okay with sort of phasing in and out of reading and playing and determining moments that you want to jump in and play, that's great. If you're somebody who's really big on adventuring and discovering new lands, is probably not one for you, at least not to start with. This is more if you like to be in a place and cultivate relationships. And truly, if you're a fan of like Call of Cthulhu, any type of investigation thing, this is really unique among Symbaroum, as far as including a lot of opportunities for intrigue and turning things around, and even, friends become enemies, enemies become friends. But there's also plenty of opportunity in here for combat, for stealth, for getting really cool weapons and armor. Hell, you could even like open a shop to sell it. You can really make, if you were to do a business, go the business route in this, you could have a lot of fun like growing your business. And the sell swords is a cool thing you could just keep taking missions and learning about things by positioning yourself as sort of like a neutral third party that's just, hey, what you need dirty work, we'll do it. For more information on that, see Dirty Work with Norm Macdonald, possibly one. I think I'll say it. I think it's the greatest movie of all time. Other than that, thank you once again, Noble Knight, for sponsoring the video, and thank you again to Free League for providing this review copy. City of Eternal Euphoria, Agrella, featuring the 3-part campaign, The Outreach. We'll do the outro. Well, the outro of Betrayed Brethren. The outrage. Oh my gosh. I mean, it's embarrassing. It is. I'm embarrassed. Free League is they're never going to work with me again. Please, Free League. I'm sorry. I'll do better next time. I'll do better.